All right, this is going to be the last set of notes before your next upcoming test. And this is, again, oh, I should probably get rid of this. That way you can actually read my closed captions if you want to. But so this is going to be talking about what happens when the economy goes bad and how does the government get itself involved. It's a really timely topic considering what's going on right now. And so I want us to take a look at how does the government get involved in saving the economy or making sure it goes in the right direction. And so I just want you to do a thought experiment really quickly. Nothing to write down here. Please don't write down this slide. I just want you to think to yourself. Let's say that at the end of the day, I could give you 2 extra credit points or 6 extra credit points on your daily grade. You get to choose, but here's the thing. If of a class of 20, if 10% of you, or if even two of you decide to get 6 extra credit points, nobody gets any extra credit points. So does that make sense? So if I opted to get two, and most of us decided, and all of us decided to get two, we would all get 2 extra credit points. But if all of us decided to get two, and one of us decided to get six, that one person's going to get six. But at the moment when that second person says they want six, so if most everybody says two, but two people say they want 6 extra credit points, absolutely nobody gets extra credit points. What would you do in that situation? Do you think you would go for two and be safe, or would you go for the six at the risk of everybody else losing? It's kind of like our goldfish game back at the beginning of the year, and it leads to a problem that we call the tragedy of the commons. So why is the government even involved in our economy? Why don't we just let everything go? Just don't even bother. Again, think about our goldfish game at the beginning of the year where you all were around a table. You had to determine how many goldfish you wanted to get. Some of you died, some of you lived. That's the tragedy of the commons. The idea that there are common goods, meaning that we all have access to them, just like you all had access to the fishing pond. And then when that happens, if there are no rules, it's going to get abused. Somebody's going to take too many goldfish. Somebody's going to get greedy and go for that 6 extra credit points and cause everybody to get no extra credit points. Even if a few people act wisely or carefully, even if a few of you are like, I only should take one goldfish at a time, or I should only go for 2 extra credit points, there are going to be others who are going to take the extra risk and they're going to abuse the resources. We call those people the free riders, the people who will benefit without paying the price. Fishing is just an easy, fantastic example. Because here's the thing about fishing. We want to keep enough fish in the sea in order for them to reproduce so that we can all have more fish. But if I overfish, if I don't overfish, then I think somebody else is going to do it. So I'm going to overfish so that I have enough, even if that hurts other people. We have to police ourselves, and we're not very good at that. And so that's why we have this tragedy of the commons, where something that we all hold together, somebody's going to abuse it. And so that's why the government needs to get involved, and we have to create rules. That way we can make sure that everybody gets what they need. And normally, and this is a bit of a capitalist perspective, but I would agree with this perspective. Normally, the free markets, meaning that if you leave it alone, it's fairly good at taking care of itself. Think about it. If I run a business and I don't pay my employees well, and it gets out there that I pay my employees terrible, and there's another business that does really well, but it pays its employees really well, more people are going to want to work for them, and more people might buy from them. And so I might lose, not because the government said so, but because the people responded. Buyers responded to the situation. There were incentives, there were motivations to encourage people to make decisions that help themselves. But in a way, it also helps other people. But there are things that we call market failures. When the thing that's in our best interest to do, the thing that if we were smart that we would do, doesn't happen because we do what's selfish and we do what's good for us. And so it's bad for all of society. If we all fish out of the pond, we're all going to run out of fish. And that's bad for society because we'll all starve. It might, for example, with the coronavirus going on right now, like it might be beneficial for you, to run your company or to keep going to basketball games and stuff like that. But you might, as a result, spread the virus. And so that would be a failure. And so that's why the government steps in and orders you to shut down. That way you don't do the selfish thing rather than maybe the smart thing. You don't need to write this down. You do not need to write this down. But a great example is pollution. If I have a factory that's upriver, think about what happens to that water downstream. All the pollution is going to keep going down the river. The factory doesn't have a good reason to clean the water. Why would they? The problems move on to the next person. And so, unless they're forced somehow to be clean, why would they pay for it? That's somebody else's problem. That's somebody else's cost. It's not something they feel like they should have to do. We call this an externality. It's a side effect. It's a side effect of the person that's usually not experienced by the person who did it. So a negative externality or a bad side effect that happens if a company is using a river is the pollution. The company doesn't have to deal with it because it's somebody else's problem. And so that's why it's a negative externality. Dangerous behavior can have negative externalities. Now, obviously, smoking and drinking can have negative consequences to you, but they also affect people around you. Think about secondhand smoke, where other people can be it's as if they have the negative side effects of smoking, even though they aren't actually smoking. Think about people who get into car accidents and people who are innocent and we're driving and we're following the law. But because some people were out there drinking and driving like idiots, they have to face the negative side effects or food poisoning or stuff like that. Something where somebody else is paying the consequences for your terrible decisions. There can also be positive externalities. Education, as I've been trying to argue to you, is a benefit to yourself, but is also a benefit to other people. If you are educated, you're also more likely to treat other people in an intelligent way and to make good decisions. And green behaviors such as recycling and stuff like that, yeah, they can affect you right here and right now, but they're going to affect people in the future or other wildlife and animals beyond yourself. And so that really has is a positive side effect. So externalities are side effects, things that don't affect you, or if they do affect you, they affect other people who are not involved at all. That's an externality. And so how can the government solve these problems? It can do it in two different ways. One is what we call regulation solutions, which are rules set down by the government. You must do this thing. And so they can be bans, like how certain places have banned smoking. In the state of Nebraska, you cannot smoke in a lot of buildings and restaurants. And that has been successful in getting rid of smoking. Quotas, which is a limit on the amount that can be made. When the grocery stores were starting to run out of toilet paper, there was a quota, a limit that was put on the amount that each individual person could get out of the grocery store. Something called public service announcements. I'm sure you've heard or you've seen them or heard them on the radio or on TV or on YouTube ads. Things that just encourage you to do certain usually positive behaviors like quitting smoking or not vaping or not drinking and driving. All of that sort of stuff. Those are public service announcements. And these are fairly effective. Like I said, smoking was kind of stamped out by and large due to bans as well as due to public service announcements. And then on the flip side, you can kind of try to trick the economy into doing what you want it to do. These are market solutions where you're trying to be tricky and you're trying to make it so that somebody will act selfishly, but in a way that helps everyone. And so there are a couple of ways you can do this. One is you can increase taxes. We actually already do this on things like tobacco. We tax the crap out of it. And so as a result, less and less people use tobacco products. We tax basically, there are a lot of things that we don't ban that are bad, but we tax the crap out of them so that we encourage people not to use them. And we also try to make things cheaper. So we do subsidies, and that's just another word for the government spending to encourage people to use or buy a product. So sometimes the government spends money like on healthy foods in order to encourage people to buy them. It hasn't been terribly successful, but it's something you could do. These can be cheaper than trying to enforce laws, and sometimes they can be more effective because this person is still acting selfishly. They're just acting selfishly in a way that helps other people. These are the recap questions you need to do. Remember, you need to either fill out the paper or you need to do the online form, but you need to define what the tragedy of the commons is, and you need to remember what an example of a regulation solution is. and put in those answers on the Google form. Here are the funnies you get for today. For those of you who still struggle to understand a difference, so not really a funny, but just kind of a clever, like, ah, good way to remember. And the idiot behind is following too closely, but they have no idea you are an expert in Mario Kart. I can almost hear Toad doing the wobble, 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 wobble sound. And finally, oh no, it's hard to see, but it just says it's a door. Get it? It's a door, and it's on a door. Anyway, I'm sorry you couldn't see that, but in any case, make sure you fill out the Google form. Otherwise, have a good rest of your guys' day.